Have you ever wondered why some women vanish from a man's life, without rage, without a single word, and yet her silence echoes in his psyche like a ghost he can't exorcise? She becomes unforgettable, not because she demanded to be remembered, but because she understood something ancient, something visceral and wordless about human nature. She moved with the power of feminine withdrawal, a spiritual detachment that touched something deeper than his conscious mind. She touched his shadow. And the shadow, as Jung taught, does not forget what disturbs its sleep. Most men never know what haunts them. They just feel it, in the quiet, in the space between relationships, in the moments they should be happy but aren't. It's the lingering scent of the woman who left no drama, no chaos, just distance. She didn't slam the door, she simply vanished, and her silence, so elegant, so cruel in its calm, became the mirror he was never ready to look into. What a woman does in silence is rarely understood, but it is deeply felt. It dismantles illusions, strips away the masculine ego, and exposes the places where he is most fragile, his need to control, to possess, to be needed. And when she no longer feeds that hunger, he begins to starve, not for her body, but for the reflection of himself he once saw in her eyes. That reflection is gone now, and it was the only place he ever felt whole. A woman who knows her power does not raise her voice. She does not explain herself. She does not chase. Her silence speaks a forgotten language, one older than desire and more potent than sex. It is the language of the anima, the feminine soul inside every man that calls him to his own depth and terrifies him. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But he forgot to mention what happens when only O is brave enough to be transformed. The feminine, when awakened, evolves quickly. She no longer seeks validation from his attention because she has begun to see herself through the eyes of the divine. And when she does, she becomes dangerous, not because she harms, but because she no longer plays the game. There is a moment when she pulls back, not to punish, but to preserve. She becomes still. She stops explaining, stops softening her truths. She lets the silence carry the message that her words once protected him from, and it is in this silence that the man begins to unravel. He will replay everything she didn't say. He will study her absence like a sacred text, not because he wants to understand her, but because in her quiet withdrawal, she forced him to face himself. And most men do not know how to do that without her. It is not her beauty that haunts him. It is the version of himself he tried to become in her presence, the man he almost was, the courage he found in her gaze, the softness she allowed him to feel without shame. When she leaves, it all goes with her, and he is left with the raw truth. He didn't lose her. He lost who he was when he was with her. This is the psychic wound the feminine inflicts, not maliciously, but inevitably. A woman rooted in her worth becomes the mirror of everything a man is not ready to confront. His fear of intimacy, his unresolved mother wound, his performative masculinity, his unacknowledged longing for nurturing. She does not call him out on these things. She simply refuses to be the container for them. And so she becomes mythic in his mind, a siren, a phantom, an echo, not because she lied or manipulated, but because she disappeared when he still needed her to stay. That is the first silent thing a woman does that haunts a man's soul. She leaves emotionally before she leaves physically. Long before he notices the shift, she has already detached. She watches his patterns with new eyes, unblinking. She no longer reacts, no longer gives the ego what it craves. She becomes a mystery to him, because she has finally remembered herself. And when she walks away, he realizes far too late. She was never trying to hurt him. She was healing herself. He just happened to be standing in the blast radius. He will speak of her in metaphors now, not because he wants to, but because ordinary language cannot capture what she became in his psyche. She is no longer just a woman to him. She is an archetype, the elusive feminine, the wound and the balm, the one who knew him not by words but by silence. She becomes a riddle he cannot solve because her actions were never designed to be understood by logic. They were felt, and that is why they linger. The second silent thing she does, the thing that cuts deeper than any spoken rejection, is that she stops needing to be understood. Most women plead to be seen, to be heard, to be validated, But when a woman crosses the threshold of emotional self-ownership, she no longer asks for understanding. She allows herself to be misinterpreted, to be judged, to be misunderstood. Not out of apathy, but out of power. She knows the danger of trying to explain the feminine to the masculine when he is not yet ready to listen, and so she speaks no more. She lets the silence teach him what words never could, that his love was conditional, that his presence was performative, and that her softness was earned, not owed. This kind of woman becomes his reckoning. She is the feminine that awakens men not with fire, but with distance, not with punishment, but with presence, and then the sudden lack of it. The fourth silent act that lodges itself into his soul is perhaps the most subtle. She no longer mirrors his wounds. In the beginning, she may have unconsciously reflected back his traumas, responding to his detachment with longing, his anger with softness, his absence with overgiving. But once she awakens to her own pattern, she stops, coldly, without warning, and the feedback loop he relied on to validate his dysfunction collapses. Now he's left with nothing to bounce off of, no reactive partner, no one to chase him or decode his silences. She has exited the dance, and he's still spinning, alone, to music that stopped playing long ago. He doesn't realize it, but she just initiated him into shadow work. Without meaning to, without trying, she created the conditions for him to see himself naked, without adoration, without worship, without the feminine energy holding space for his brokenness. This is the kind of woman who doesn't just leave a void, she becomes it, a holy emptiness, a psychic abyss, and a man who has not yet met his own unconscious will always fear this kind of woman, even as he obsesses over her. There are women who leave footprints, and there are women who leave fractures. The fifth silent thing she does that sears itself into his memory is this. She begins to love herself in front of him, quietly, relentlessly, without permission, without performance. At first he doesn't notice. Her self-respect is subtle, like a slow leak in a sinking ship. She no longer over-explains, she no longer adjusts her needs to accommodate his moods. She no longer asks to be chosen, because she has already chosen herself. And when a woman does this, truly does this, it destabilizes everything in a man who has not yet confronted his entitlement. Her glow changes. It becomes internal, no longer fueled by his attention. She still moves with grace, still speaks with softness, but something is different, something primal. He sees her but can no longer reach her. That is what haunts him. He tries the old tricks, withdrawal, silence, a flash of affection, the breadcrumb, but they no longer touch her. She's not ignoring him to make a point, she's simply not playing anymore, and that is far more unsettling than any game. To the uninitiated man, a woman in her full self-possession is dangerous, not because she seeks to destroy him, but because she forces him to confront how little power he ever truly had. He watches her reclaim her time, reclaim her body, reclaim her voice. She doesn't need to be loud about it. Her quiet self-devotion says more than any confrontation ever could. And this is what makes her unforgettable. Not her pain, not her sacrifice, but her transformation. He witnessed it. He had a front row seat. And now, that same love she once gave him, blindly, recklessly, hoping he'd see her, is being poured inward, tenderly, fiercely, with reverence. The human psyche, Jung believed, is drawn to symbols, and she becomes one, the symbol of a life he could have had, if only he had been ready. This is not just regret, it is existential grief. He does not merely mourn her, he mourns the version of himself that might have emerged if he had risen to meet her. She was the catalyst, the initiation, the fire and the mirror. And now that she is gone, all that remains is the haunting question. Who could I have been if I hadn't been afraid? But fear always chooses comfort over truth. And so, most men retreat, they distract, they date the safe women. The ones who don't see too much, don't ask too much, don't reflect too much, but it's never the same. Because once a man has been in the presence of a woman, and who knows herself, every inauthentic interaction after that rings hollow. This is the sixth silent act that brands her into his unconscious. She stops needing him to be more. She no longer clings to his potential, no longer tries to awaken what he refuses to face. She releases the fantasy, and that release, that pure, wordless surrender, is what shatters him. The fantasy dies in her silence, and with it, his illusion of control. This is the moment he begins to spiral. Not outwardly, perhaps, but internally the ground shifts. Something sacred has slipped through his fingers, and he knows it. A woman like this doesn't return, not because she's bitter, but because she's been reborn. And rebirth requires death, of delusion, of dependency, of the old self that waited and pleaded and bled. By the time he realizes the depth of her leaving, she is already elsewhere, not with another man necessarily, often with no one at all. Because solitude for this kind of woman is not loneliness, it is sanctuary. She has entered a season of inner flowering. The feminine, once distorted by overgiving, has returned to its source. And here is the final, seventh act of silence that echoes into eternity. She no longer fears being forgotten. She no longer needs to haunt him. She no longer waits to be remembered. Her silence is not a strategy, it is a resting place. And that is why it echoes, because the moment she stops trying to be unforgettable, she becomes immortal in his psyche. She walked through his life like smoke, untouchable, shapeless, everywhere. And now she lingers in the places he doesn't speak about. She became the shadow he never integrated, the memory he can't fully name, and she will always be there, not as the woman who hurt him, but as the one who refused to betray herself for his comfort. He will move on. At least that's what it will look like. He will laugh again, go on dates, perhaps even fall into another relationship. But the laughter will be quieter now, less whole. The conversations will feel slightly off. Something will be missing. But he won't know how to name it, because what he lost was not just a woman, it was a portal, a mirror, a key. That is the final and cruelest irony of her silence. It doesn't scream. It hums beneath the surface of his days, like a song he can't quite hear, but can't stop trying to remember. Jung wrote of the anima as the feminine aspect within the male unconscious, a guide, a bridge to the soul. Most men project this anima onto the women they desire, trying to possess her rather than understand the message she carries. And when she leaves, not just physically but archetypally, it is not the loss of the woman alone that wounds him, it is the severing of his soul's call to evolve. She was more than a partner, she was the mirror of his unfinished work. This haunting is not punishment, it is invitation, but few accept it, because to follow her, to truly integrate what her silence revealed, would require death. The death of the false self, the performance, the ego built around dominance and distance, and most men are not taught how to die before they live, so they avoid, they numb, they call her crazy or too much or ungrateful, anything to protect the illusion that they were enough as they were. But the truth is not cruel, it is simply heavy. She didn't leave because he wasn't lovable. She left because he wasn't willing to meet her in the place where love becomes liberation. Her haunting is sacred. It is not born from vengeance or bitterness. It is born from alignment. She aligned with herself, and in doing so she departed from everything and everyone that once asked her to shrink. That kind of departure has a frequency. It vibrates through time, through memory, through the quiet hours of the night when he can no longer distract himself with noise. There, in the silence, she returns. Not physically, she would never go back, but emotionally, archetypally, spiritually, she appears in his dreams in the scent of someone walking by, in the line of a poem, in the flash of a stranger's eyes. Not her, but almost her, never her. And that almost becomes his personal purgatory. The man who is haunted by a woman's silence has one of two choices: to bury it deeper, or to let it burn through him and be transformed, to step onto the path of individuation, the painful unraveling of everything he thought he was, or to remain trapped in the echo chamber of his unexamined desires. Some awaken. They go to therapy, they read Jung, they do the shadow work, they begin to excavate the ruins she left behind and find, buried beneath them, the seeds of their true self. And they will never forget her, not as a fantasy but as a force, a threshold, the one who woke the fire. But others, they will try to replace her, and fail. Because the woman who haunts a man is not the one who clung, not the one who begged, not the one who screamed. It is the one who said nothing, the one who disappeared into her own becoming, the one who, without malice or intent, showed him the exact shape of the man he was too afraid to become. She did not leave with anger. She left with self-respect. She did not abandon him. She released him. She did not destroy him. She let him face his own emptiness, and that is the echo that never leaves. In the stillness of her exit, he came face to face with the silence inside himself, the parts of him that no longer had an audience, the broken pieces she once held with grace, the fragility she had forgiven over and over again. It was all there, waiting, and now no one else was. Some call her cold, but she was never cold, only clear. And clarity, when you are not ready for it, feels like cruelty. She loved him perhaps, but she loved herself more. And that ultimately is what split the earth beneath them. Because no man forgets the woman who showed him his soul, then walked away before he was ready to meet it. There is a kind of woman whose presence feels like prophecy you don't recognize it at first. You mistake it for chemistry, allure, infatuation. But over time you come to understand this was never about romance. She was sent to reveal what you hide, reveal what you fear, reveal what you are capable of if only you stopped running. And when she finally leaves, there is no trail, no final glance, no dramatic conclusion, only space, stillness, an unnerving quiet that stretches out into your life like the pause between two heartbeats, a space where something should be but isn't. That's the final layer of her silence. It doesn't just leave you, it leaves you with yourself. Jung spoke of the individuation process, the sacred inner journey toward becoming whole. Few undertake it. Fewer still complete it. But every man haunted by a woman like this stands at the threshold of that path, trembling, because her absence isn't just a wound, it's a door into the very soul he spent his whole life avoiding, a door guarded by every fear he's buried, of being seen, of being soft, of being vulnerable, of being enough without the performance. When she leaves, she doesn't slam that door behind her. She leaves it open, just slightly. And every so often, in the dead quiet of night, when the distractions have dulled and the facades have fallen, he hears it creak. The invitation is still there, but it will cost him everything he thinks he is. She is not the prize. She is the test, not of his charm, but of his capacity for transformation. And so many fail it. Not because they are weak, but because they have been taught to value control over connection, pride over vulnerability, domination over depth. And this kind of woman, she doesn't bend to those values. She dissolves them. She moves with a grace that doesn't flinch, a serenity that unsettles, a sovereignty that exposes. And for a man whose identity depends on being needed, wanted, chased, her indifference is like acid to his ego. But for the man who dares, for the man who sees her not as a possession lost, but as a lesson delivered, for the man who understands that her silence is not emptiness, but alchemy, something begins to shift. He returns to the places they once spoke, walks the streets they wandered, hears her laughter in the sound of wind through leaves, and slowly the pain becomes poetry, the ache becomes awakening, and he understands. She never truly left him. She left the version of herself that was willing to stay small for his comfort, and in doing so she gave him the greatest gift a woman can give a man, the mirror of his becoming. She was not sent to stay. She was sent to shatter, to strip away illusion, to dismantle the scaffolding of false masculinity, to whisper through her silence, "Meet yourself, or lose everything pretending you already have." And so the haunting becomes holy, the silence becomes sacred, and the memory of her, of who she was, who she became, becomes not a wound, but a prayer. He may never see her again, but if he lets the silence speak, he will meet her within himself, in the soft places, in the strength born of surrender, in the stillness where real love begins, not the love that binds, but the love that frees. This is the love she chose for herself, and this is the love he must now choose for his own soul.